Shalom, shalom, everybody. Welcome. Ariel Tzadok here from the KosherTorah School, found online at www.KosherTorah.com. I'm bringing to you what for me is tonight this lesson number 10 in our series called the biblical sources, if you will, of the Prophetic Kabbalah. And tonight is going to be the final class in this series. During the previous lessons, I have focused on the lives and experiences of the two great prophets, Eliyahu Hanavi and, of course, Elisha. And boy, oh boy, we saw them pulling off some pretty cool stunts. And a point that I've tried to make throughout this series is, if you will, what I call the mechanics of how this operates. You see, what happens when we lack proper education is that we fill in the blanks of what we're missing with fantasy as opposed to fact. This lessens our levels of understanding and brings us, if you will, from the factual to the fictional. And this is pretty much the place where the understanding of Torah, prophecy, and religion has been for the longest time. And this is a problem because when we look at the Bible in general, look at our present cultural conflict in our world today. With the growth in the previous centuries of science, and science, as you know, is predicated upon the foundation that everything that we're going to accept as, in quote, real, has to be verifiable, testable, reproducible, and the like. And if it's not, then it's just myth and mythology and the like. And the schism between science and religion began based upon that principle. The Bible can never be proven, and therefore, by conclusion, it is myth and fantasy to be dismissed, and the, in quote, new religion of rationalism has been born. Well, as you can imagine, well, we don't need to imagine, we have seen where the centuries have taken us. We see how there arose in the 20th century, and now rearing its ugly head again in the 21st century, those attitudes of absolutism, which literally have embraced the psychology, the emotionalism of a religion, a counter-religion, and competes. Secularism and science has today become its own religion, proclaiming its own, in quote, faith, and competes with, in quote, the old religions. And if you really look at the conflict in Western culture today in this light, you will see it's echoing the same psychology of what echoed the conflict, say, for example, between Christianity and Islam during the times of the Crusades. The hatred, the venom, it's this way, that way. And how many really seek to find resolution? Now, if you think about it today, look at the division and the strife that not so much the doctrine or dogma of a religion, but the entire concept of it. You believe in what? A God? And you believe in that stupid Bible and blah, 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 blah. This is what happens when there is a lack of proper understanding and knowledge. And let's take that same problem, lack of proper understanding and knowledge, and apply it to the, in quote, new religion of science. Because guess what? Modern science is dabbling in new forefronts, pioneering new explorations. Where? Quantum physics. It's taking them into levels of curiosity, of parallel worlds and higher realms of consciousness and interactions with energetic fields which connect all life forms. Sounds like the Force. Or, kind of sounds like mysticism. Modern science is picking up on this, and they have been since the end of World War II. parapsychology, psychic development. Oh, don't you think our governments don't put big bucks into this type of scientific exploration? Because yes, they do. And you'll find the likes of the military and the Pentagon and the CIA and the like, of course, acknowledging, but we did this for however many years, 20 years or so. And of course, we invested all this kinds of money or so. And we concluded there's nothing there. Really. So let me get this straight. It took you 20 years and however many tens of millions of dollars to decide you don't like something. 20 years? Really? Okay. You know what? If I go to the store and I don't know, let's say I want to try something new, whether it be a new food or a new drink or something, and the missus might say, take a taste. I take a taste, say a little drink. Nah, I don't like it. I know right away. It's not going to take me 20 years to decide. I don't have to spend millions and millions of dollars. Please recognize that what comes out in the news, yeah. I mean, let's be blunt, all right? I know a number of you come and join our KosherTorah School audience because of my interactions with the Prometheus production show, Ancient Aliens. And, of course, I share with people there a lot, which they certainly do not put on the television program. And there is even a lot more that I put in my book, Aliens, Angels, and Demons. And then there is a lot more that is still classified that I have to confess I'm not allowed to publicly disseminate. But there is that which I can disseminate, and I have, and I will continue to do so. And don't think that our government don't know who and what's out there or down there. And, I mean, in the smokescreen of modern times with all the social problems and health problems, all kinds of weird stuff is going on. And no one's paying attention. Well, let me tell you something. I believe in the wise words of King Solomon, who said, Devar be'ito matov. Everything in its time is good. And I believe that we're in unique times. For the record, no, I don't believe the Messiah is around the corner. So for those people who like sitting watching, you watch, they're waiting for Mashiach to come. Nice. Oh, Principle 7, 13 principles. I embrace it 1,000,000%. All right? I believe in perfect faith in the coming of the Mashiach, and even though it may tarry, I'll wait daily for his coming. And yes, I will. Daily. But just in case he doesn't come today or tomorrow, okay, I'm cool. I understand that. I've written about many things about prophetic understandings, coming of Mashiach and the stuff. And what we need to do, rather than look at books which are detached from the reality of things, because they're academic, theoretical knowledge, you have to have your hand on the pulse of things. And you have to be able to sense and feel the pulse. For those of you who are familiar with medicinal practices out of the Orient, all right, Chinese, Ayurveda, and the like, they can do pulse diagnoses. They take two fingers, they put it on your pulse, they can tell you everything that's going on inside you. And you say, that's silly, it's ridiculous. Oh, really? Well, let me tell you something about like that weirdo Chinese medicine stuff, like the acupuncture and acupressure stuff that in the West we say, it's a bunch of nonsense. Well, all of those nonsensical Chinese scientists who are right now on the pioneer of the development of modern technologies, all right, those nonsensical, Chinese scientists who may or may not have developed a virus. We won't go there. We won't get political. These guys are pretty smart guys. They know what they're doing. They have the best of both worlds. They are some of the top medical researchers in the world today, and have access to all that ancient stuff in India too, certainly in India. Well, let me tell you something about these guys who are so pioneering in modern stuff, but such experts in the old stuff. You see, they don't dismiss and discount the old stuff. They've done the tests scientifically to try to verify and discover and identify chi, kundalini, the value of acupuncture, acupressure. And by the thousands, maybe more, they have those medical tests. They have them all, possibly in Hindi or in Chinese and possibly not translated into English or French or Spanish, but maybe some have. All right, that's something you can go explore on your own. My point in emphasizing this isn't to make a polemic stance of any political and or cultural statement, but to acknowledge what real religion is supposed to be, which is the pursuit of truth. So, from a point of small truth, way back when, centuries ago, science made statements just like any religion in its beginning stages. It's in quote catechism, it's proclamations of faith, and excluded all else. But now, science has grown, it's evolved just like religion, and they've gone into those realms of higher consciousness, into the parallel worlds, interacting with other entities not of this earth, to the point where they have discovered and held vehicles not of this earth. Go check that stuff out online, okay? I wrote all about this in my disclosure essays. It's right on the front page of www.KosherTorah.com, our website. Go check it out. Read it for yourself. Right now it's free. Eventually I'll publish it, put it in a book with some other stuff, but until that time comes. So no one understand. The new religion of science is fast losing that line of demarcation between the old religion of the Bible. But now Bible also has to not evolve, not change, not reform, but rather shuv hakadmon, go back to its origins and be understood as it originally was. One of the things that years and years ago, like many of my peers, I was involved with polemic debates with members of different faiths, ideas, and beliefs, saying my way's better than your way. You know, sung, of course, to the old Oscar Mayer Wiener song. And I say that to emphasize just how not serious such debates really are. It's pretty much a very, childish way. My way's better than your way, and everybody's fighting this way. Isaiah 53 means this, and this one means that. Yeah, we all know that, all right? Big deal. That's not what it's all about. Go back, way back. And in order to go way back to understand the Torah, the Nevi'im, prophets, the Ketuvim, the writings, number one, you must understand their original language, Hebrew. You will never get a proper understanding of Tanakh in any translation. I don't care how much you want to swear that the King James Bible is the authorized word of God and that alone. Hey, that's what you want to believe, go for it. I don't mind. Believe whatever you want. But just in case you are in the pursuit of truth, rather than look at an English word, because I don't want to shatter any bubbles here, but I'm going to have to tell you the truth. Our prophet Moses, Moshe Rabbeinu alav shalom, and those who followed after him, the great prophets Samuel and Isaiah and Ezekiel and Jeremiah, and of course Eliyahu and Elisha, I think I can say with authority, never ever in their lives spoke a word of English, Spanish, French, German, Russian, or for that matter, Yiddish. Never a word. What can I say? But some people are going to get offended. I'm sorry. I'm saying what I think is common sense. Don't you know this? These individuals, and let's throw in the women as well, Devorah and Huldah and the rest, okay? Because this is not a sexist thing. They lived in a culture a long time ago, which had a mentality very, very far away from ours. And you need to understand this. But yet they were the same psychological types as we are today. When it comes to understanding the Torah, you must understand we're not reading a book called the Bible. There is no book called the Bible. What we have is a collection of dozens of different texts written over many centuries by different authors. And we, rabbis, put together a selection of these to say this is what represents us. And that's what we call the Torah, the prophets, and the writings, or the Tanakh. And as we learn what these texts are really teaching us, this is how we recognize what, in quote, the true message of the prophets really is. And if you want to receive that true message, then that reception is what we call the Kabbalah. And this is the Kabbalah of the biblical prophets. Now, before I continue summarizing what that is, it popped into my head, and I'm just going to go with the flow. I believe in going with the flow because I believe that's a very prophetic thing to do. You know, I was commenting to the Rabbanit before we began this class. We were out, we had 101 different things to do. We came in very late, and I said to her, the last thing that was for this class, I said, you know, I had practically no time to prepare, no notes and books and stuff. I said, not a problem. So I open up, let flow what comes in. You see, let me explain to you the concept of how this works. It's right out of the Sefer Yetzirah, which we just finished, our 96 lesson series in video, available on YouTube, and of course the audio class, along with much of my other works, written, audio, and the like. Like 118-page PDF is going to be available soon. It has my old naturalist course on the Sefer Yetzirah, all 96 audio lessons, all my essays, including my book, The Blue Rose. It's going to be available for a donation of $280. Watch for it on KosherTorah. It'll be available. But the basic concept in the Sefer Yetzirah was you had two different realities, one called Sefirot and one called the Otiot, or the letters of the Torah. And that the Sefirot were like the soul that goes in to the letters. So what we would call that is, if you will, the spiritual and the physical, the energy to the construct, force versus form. When I endeavor to speak, I spend my life as a rabbi learning books, reading all the words that were created by all those letters. And in my mind, I have a composite of all these different ideas and concepts and thoughts and beliefs that have accrued through learning over, I guess, now over 40 years. And when I want to, I open up to receive. And somehow that, in quote, Sephirotic energy comes into my head and takes all that stuff inside and puts it all into an order, creating the thoughts that I'm thinking right now. What? What? No. What? No, if you're not going to talk to me, I'm not going to know. Ellie's talking to me off camera, is trying to give me cues. Talk to me. What? My hand? What about my hand? Oh, it's bleeding. Ah, okay. I had a little cut on my hand, and somehow it's bleeding. Now you could say, what does that have to do with anything? Remember I told you, I don't believe in coincidence. And this is actually part of the prophetic teachings. I don't believe in coincidence. I don't believe in distractions. If something happens, it happens for a reason. Okay? So if my hand, I had a cut yesterday. Big deal. Nothing. Something in the kitchen. I slipped on a peel or something. And I put a Band-Aid on, and all of a sudden, now in class, it decides to bleed, right? And the Rabbanit there, faithful to her place, right, tries to get my attention, nice, delicate, quiet, but me, like I said, I'm in the zone. She knows that very well, and I'm not thinking. So, got to go distract and bring it in. Why? Why does something like this happen? Remember I told you that light of the Sefirot coming into the letters? There's no distraction here. Isaiah chapter 6, Malo kol haaretz kavodo. The whole world is full of God's energy, the Sephirotic thing. It's in everything that happens at every moment, at every time. And if you don't go with the flow, you will never get it. So let's say, for example, I chose to be rather academic. and I ignored what the Rabbanit wanted to say. I could be waving my hand, it could be bloody. Oh, it's all bloody. Ellie, do me, go get me a Band-Aid, would you please? In the bathroom there. I have no idea why all of a sudden it's bleeding, but it is. So you know something? As we say, you go with the flow. And it's not a distraction. It is what it is. And you know what I say it is? I say that this is an example of what it is I'm trying to talk about. So many people, many of my peers, I see this all the time on YouTube. They create such professional, entertaining videos and the like. Me, I don't believe in any of that stuff. With me, what you see is what you get. If there's a mistake, it's going to be shown to the world. If my cut opens up, yeah, just open it up. Do me a favor, open it up, get it ready, and I'm just going to pop it on here. So this way it will not distract us anymore. There you go. Anyway, these things happen. They happen in your life, don't they? They happen every day, don't they? So therefore, thank you, dear. So don't say and don't think, well, I don't like distractions because I have to be focused. And in other words, you try to live in a fantasy as opposed to a reality. Things like this are real. They happen. So what? Bigger things happen all the time. You must learn that when the energy flows, it flows into the letters, and the letters will take a shape this way, and they'll take a shape that way. And when you are in connection with that Yehud, then you go with the flow. Yehud, that's unity. We say that every day. Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. I'm going to explain it to you real simple and quick, because it's a very powerful projected meditation. Part of the prophetic way. Shema. Hear, listen, psychically, telepathically, the individual mind is breaking the limitation of the individual brain, projecting to the collective consciousness. The collective consciousness we call in our tradition, Yisrael. All the souls that collectively stood at Sinai, in quote, all 12 tribes, not just one called the Jews from Judah. And what is the connection? What is the message? Yud-Ke Vav-Ke, not Jehovah, not Yahweh, but the active being, the reality, the presence, the consciousness, the sentience, the force of reality. That and that alone is our, in quote, God, director, source, guide, teacher. That alone. And remember what the important thing about the Bible is. Standing against idolatry. Prophets were very big on that. Idolatry is believing or accepting anything as God that's not God. And in all due respect, almost all of our religions today do exactly that. They have all kinds of phantasaical constructs and ideas and thoughts about what they say and proclaim God is. That is very limiting, narrow, and by definition, strange and bizarre activity or strange work. Strange work in Hebrew, avodah zarah, what we call idolatry. And you want to know something curious and funny? If you look at atheism today, secular science, and their attack on religion, the attack on religion isn't so much on the essence of the spiritual element of the religion, which they themselves are discovering. It's on the external forms of religion, which have become the, if you will, face of religion, which are themselves essentially modern golden calves and are pretty much idolatrous. Yeah, it's got a lot of idolatry going on around today, and people just don't pay attention. Well, how curious it is that in the name of anti-religion, you have those who are actually upholding what real religion is supposed to be. How weird is God's world? Hey, God works in strange ways. And that is what we must always understand. And what is it that we're supposed to always understand? That we don't understand much at all. Yud-Ke Vav-Ke is our guide, our leader, the director, our Elohim, And the essence of that direction is unity. Hashem, Echad. That is the meaning of the Shema. That we are trying to send a psychic message into the collective consciousness of all humanity. We're all part of the same body. We're all part of the same whole. We're like individual cells of a greater connection. What happens when we don't have that proper connection? That's when the body breaks down. Can you imagine if the cells don't get along, they don't communicate with one another? It's a problem. Now, moments ago, you just witnessed this. Okay? I had something on my hand. Ellie saw it. I didn't. She needed to get my attention. And I'm sitting here in this direction looking this way, and she's over there that way, and she has to get louder and louder. Finally, I just say, make the connection. And the connection, therefore, is made, and the action occurs, and the flow continues. This is how we need to understand today, because this is the message of the biblical prophets. Go back over the chapters that we have covered and those that we haven't, and look at the nature of the interactions of the lives of these individuals. Whether it was Eliyahu Hanavi, who on one day is calling down fire from heaven, burning up, idolatrous, burning up the altar, burning up the sacrifices, slaughtering the false prophets and the like, and in such a state of power and triumph, he flees the country in fear of an evil queen who is sending out assassins to kill him. High, low, right? He says, I'm done, right? You have the likes of Elisha. This guy, he like predated the Jedi out of Star Wars kind of stuff with all the stuff he's doing. And he says, I want to be double of what you are, Eliyahu. And apparently he got it. He was a super psychic type of guy. And when we review all of the lessons of their lives, and you see the highs and the lows and the going with the flow, nowhere did Eliyahu thump his chest and say, I'm going to show these people. And he walked into the palace to Jezebel and said, in the name of the Lord. And, does a Darth Vader, with the throat thing. I find your lack of faith disturbing. Eliyahu never did that. He hightailed and got the heck out of the country. Yeah. Couldn't he have done that? I don't know. Why didn't he do that? I don't know. But what I do know is how to go with the flow. That is part of the message of what the biblical prophets and their descendants have taught. You see, when we say go with the flow, remember, we live in only a single level. You know what? I'm going to pause, rewind that. We don't live in a single level. We are only aware of living in a single level, a single consciousness. Later Kabbalah, this is what I loved about Rabbi Chaim Vital. Even though his choice of vocabulary is innovative, the understandings of I just blew it. The understandings of the Sefirot and the worlds is one of the best expressions of the internal psychodynamics of our human experience. He really got a clear vision of the collective consciousness of humanity, which he called the order of spiritual evolution, Hishtal Shalut, in what he refers to as the worlds of the Akudim, Nikudim, and the Birodim, which we've covered in our Otzrot Haim classes. Go check out the course online, and in many of my Torah Kabbalah book, as well as others. So, when we understand ourselves, we recognize that there are higher and greater realities, which we are presently in, but unaware of our presence there. What do we do about that? Well, let me just tell you this. Just as our reality is very much inhabited, so are all the others. They don't suffer as we do. that our face is in the corner and we only look at one reality, one dimension. No, they see all the other dimensions, and they travel back and forth from one dimension to the next, like we might travel, without virus restrictions, from one continent to the next. So, if a Yetziratic entity wants to pop down into Asiya, the lower physical world, he would do that with the greatest of ease, as we would in normal times hop on a flight and go from the United States to France. That's just what they do. And remember something about those entities. They're not God. They are, within their own context, finite, and therefore subject to the laws of physics in their own dimensions. And there they have to travel vehicularly, kind of like we do, but in vehicles of their own form and nature. Like what, you might ask? I don't know. How about asking Ezekiel and what he saw in his Merkava? Or Eliyahu, who has to go up to heaven in what? A chariot of fire? Chariot? Real chariot? With horses of fire. Right? At least Moses, when he went up to heaven, he went in a cloud. Curious how the Midrash states that he goes up to the cloud to ascend to heaven, and a door opens up in the cloud. He walks in, the door closes. You know something? I've been watching clouds all my life. I never saw a cloud with a door in it. Kind of weird, but what can I say? Consciousness. If I exist right now in those higher domains, how do I become aware of them? How can I shift my present focus from here to there? Well, that is exactly what was taught in the school of the biblical prophets. And yeah, you did go to school. And they learned the big, big lessons, which we still have today. Now, the acquisitions of these states of higher consciousness today are called psychic development, ESP, extrasensory perception, clairvoyance, telekinesis, telepathy, remote viewing, astral projection. I have all these other names for it. And modern science looks at this stuff as parapsychology and tries to dismiss it as having no legitimacy, though they have pretty much proven over and over again that it has a lot of legitimacy. And with that being said, how come there's such a big deal in proving it? And the answer is really very simple. How many of us have a problem understanding the Bible because we read it in the wrong language? Well, when you want to understand psychic phenomena, you better understand what it is. Let's take a step back. Remember what psychic phenomena is? Consciousness going to the next higher dimension. Well, go on to Rebbe Chaim Vital, and you'll find that the next higher dimensions are what we call Madora Klipot, the realm and domain of what we call husks or shells, or darkness and lies. Curiously, how it corresponds to the realm of our personal subconscious. That's that muck and mire deep inside us. But the higher dimension, called Yetzirah, revolves around the Sephirot, which we call Midot, or emotions. The Yetziratic realm, the angelic realm, the demonic realm, if you will, because they're not really demons in the Christian sense. They're more like devas or daemons and the like. They're technically all angels. Not necessarily, I won't get into that right now. But these entities emanating from that level are very emotionally based, not intellectually based. So consciousness in the Yetziratic realm is not intellectual. It is not mind. It is heart. And this is why the Torah says, these words I command you this day shall be upon your heart. Love the Lord your God with all your heart. What does God want from you but a good heart? Heart. Emotions, but emotions deeper than just feelings. Like in the words of Petach Eliyahu, Bina liba, that the heart is understanding, uba haleb mivin, and it's within the heart that there is true understanding. I taught the Petach Eliyahu, the prayer of the prophet Elijah from the Tikkun Zohar, a long time ago. Planning to do it again. We'll have little videos of that available, Facebook, YouTube, very shortly, next few weeks. But understand this now. When we want to ascend, there is a right and a wrong way to do it. And a lot of people try to make ascent and they try to take shortcuts. They will use things like the ayahuasca and the drugs, not realizing that these things put veils of blocking over the psychic eye, and they blur the vision. That's why we call them klipot, husks and shells. My teachers would never ever teach someone who would be involved with any kind of hallucinogenic, including pot smoking. For us, that's a very, very big negative. I will not teach private ascent to somebody who smokes pot. I just won't. I said, you're always going to end up in the wrong psychic place if that's what you do. Now you can say, what about the shamanistic traditions and their ayahuasca or other peyote and the like? Well, you know what? You and I are not walking that path. You and I are not part of that psyche. So it doesn't apply. It would be like asking me, Rabbi, how come we can't go to the department store and wear the clothing that is not designed for us? I said, we really need an answer for that. All right? This is the wise words of the old school that said, the right means in the wrong hands causes the right means to work in the wrong way. Even Carl Jung in psychology spoke about the racial subdivisions of the collective unconscious. If a person is of the Torah path, and they have to walk the Torah path, the problem with the Torah path over many centuries is that it has reflected the rationalist mentality of the secularists, and our experiential component has almost been lost entirely. One of the last few proponents of it was the Baal Shem Tov, and that was way back when, with the founding of the United States of America time. But the school of the prophets has never died. The school of ascent and experience has never ceased to crank out its graduates, men and women of all walks of life. And we believe, me and my peers, that those, in quote, secrets that were kept hidden for centuries, even millennia, that we're in a time and a place now in human history where these things really need to come out. Because we have so much chaos, so much confusion about what is religion and what is spirituality and what are the right and wrong ways to live. We are right now watching serious threats to the stability of civilization because we see such chaos erupting socially and politically, which is only a reflection of the chaos internally in the collective and individual consciousnesses of people. And that's the problem. And we got to address this. So yeah, as the wise words says, right? Et lasot lashem hefero toratecha. It is time to come to act for God because people have just nullified the Torah. We got to come out. We got to shine a light. And the original and authentic teachings of the real biblical Kabbalah, not the metaphysical stuff, the philosophy, Platon, what they call Neoplatonism. When you look at what, the Zoharic traditions and the like, a lot of the secularists have looked at the Zohar. Remember, the Zohar in traditional Orthodox Judaism is considered literally to be the work of the 2nd century Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, and is considered like the 3rd book in Judaism, next only to the Talmud and the Bible. Well, you look at secular criticism on the Zohar, and they'll say, you know what? If you look at the ideas and the concepts in the Zohar, they are really Neoplatonic philosophy in Jewish guise. I remember reading those words and believing those ideas and challenging. I considered that to be heretical. I wrote against it, and I condemned it, and I made efforts 25 years ago, mind you, that I was going to go into this Neoplatonic philosophy. I'm going to learn it myself. Plotinus, Pliny, even Plato, Timaeus, Critias. And I'm going to show these guys wrong. I'm going to show them the antiquity and authenticity of the Zohar. Neoplatonic, my foot. Well, guess what? I did my studies. 5, 10 years of them. And like the tail going between my legs, I had to admit, they were right. The Neoplatonic philosophy is there. And it did not exist in any other Jewish form, circle, or anything before the times of its original sources in the Greco-Roman Empire and the like. Now, that doesn't mean that everything that every secular scholar says is gospel truth. We don't have gospel truth. But you can't be so academic, simplistic. Remember, going with the flow? Yeah, well, if you're going with the flow is going to take you to truth. And unfortunately, the truth might not be what you and I like. The Zohar, I consider it one of the greatest books ever written. I love it. But at the same time, I recognize what it is. The Midrash of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Legends, stories. They have contributed so much to Judaism. The problem, of course, is that people misunderstand the Zohar like they misunderstand so many other things, and it creates strife and division and harm, as opposed to the inspiration and the unity and the awe that it's supposed to create. So, the Zohar is a philosophical school. It is not the biblical school of the prophets. It doesn't teach you how to experience. We have those schools. Many people look to Maimonides as the pioneer of rationalism. They don't understand his guide to the perplexed. Maimonides recognized very well the way of the biblical prophets, and what he put in the words of philosophy is kind of like the same lesson that the, in quote, Kabbalists put into the metaphysics in the Zohar. Yeah, completely different combinations of letters that create different forms and structures, but inside, the same light for those who see the Yehud, the unity. Avraham Abulafia saw it. Oh, he understood it very well. And he taught techniques of how to expand consciousness. Not the first. Contemporary, before him, Eliezer of Geramizav, Eliezer of Worms, he wrote many of these things, the older schools, which we call the Ma'aseh Merkava and the Hekhalot. And we have these traditions, like I said, to this very day. And we practice these things. And we apply practical techniques whose specific intent is to give us experiences of higher consciousness. Consciousness. That's what we call it, right? Isn't consciousness an intellectual of the mind? Didn't I say that the higher dimensional plane is of Tiferet, the emotions, Yesod, Yetzirah? Yeah, that's where you must understand. When you're experiencing higher consciousness, it's not an academic, intellectual experience. It's a deeply felt, empathic, emotional one. Women know this darn well. They call it women's intuition, right? Because they are in they're in tune. Being that they're female malchut, they naturally draw to themselves the Yetziratic realm. It's a magnetic, normal attraction for them. That's why many women become intuitive. And many men, the intellectual, get very intimidated by that. And they will look at many women practicing or experiencing this as witches, and that's why many of them have ended up getting in a lot of trouble over the years. But that doesn't, a woman's not out there, worshiping the devil and doing all this other kind of weirdo stuff just because she's psychic, okay? Woman's intuition. I know this from the Rabbanit, all right? There are times Rabbanit can tell you, she's off to the side right there. You should know. She hears, she knows. There are times when I have said, gung-ho, I'm going to do this because it's the rational, intellectual way to do it. She said, nope, wrong. And she was right. Took me a good time before I realized she was right pretty much every time. I think every time. because deep down inside, and you learn a lesson. This is why a man's supposed to marry a woman, because you're supposed to learn from that intuitive edge. What is that intuitive edge? We call it in Hebrew the Shekhinah, Malchut. That's why it's supposed to bond and all that stuff. But this is important, okay? We've got to learn that the psychic developments that we seek are not intellectual acknowledgments or acquisitions. They are emotions. They are impressions. When you look at the type of individual, now I'll give an example. I usually don't do this, but I will now. Ingo Swann, a very brilliant man who was very much in the remote viewing work with, I think it was SRI, worked with the CIA, did a whole bunch of stuff. But when you read his stuff, and yeah, I do recommend reading his stuff, he'll tell you impressions are what come to you. Impressions just come to you. Don't put them through the filter of the intellect, which narrows and blocks and confuses it. You got to allow the impressions to come out. And when he would do remote viewing, and he did some really wild stuff, documented stuff. I mean, he remote viewed himself to like Jupiter. Was seeing things around Jupiter that no person or human on Earth had ever seen, and it was proven, with space telescopes and satellites and the like. So yeah, he was really there because he felt it, and that's the secret. The biblical prophets felt their way through things. So if you remember the story with Elisha, he was asked for a prophecy. How did he get into a spirit of prophecy? Did he sit down and pray, Lord, reveal to me the secrets? No. He said, bring me a musician. I'm going to get into the beat. Boom, 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 and work himself into an impression of feeling, guts moving. And then when those impressions came into him, he opened his mind to receive Kabbalah and was able to receive the impressions until it came in clearly, and he allowed that light of the Sefirot to flow through the letters of his mind and materialize into the form of that which we call prophecy. Sometimes it made a lot of sense. Sometimes it was weird as heck. But that's the way it works. Now, this is what we need to learn. Now, in our future classes, you're going to see these, Facebook, YouTube, Patreon, and the like. I'm going to teach you the real stuff. Because, at Lasot Lashem, as it says, time has come to act. I see the internet full of all kinds of, don't get me started what I think, about the abuse, the misunderstandings, the misunderstandings, I'm going to be politically nice, of names, holy names, like the 42-letter name, Anabakoach, or the 72 triad name, and how these things are really misunderstood, misused by people who claim, I don't know what they're claiming, I don't know what their intent and purpose is, but they're not giving you the real deal. And I figured, rather than make a proclamation, I'm going to give you the real deal, then we go back into those like polemic arguments. Who says you're right and I'm wrong, you're wrong, I'm right. No, I'm going to give you something to practice. I'm going to give you something to do. And I'm going to let you see and experience for yourselves. And, I admit, I confess, I'm giving a loaded gun into the hands of a child. Don't think anything other than that truth. Why? Because maybe we need some people to shoot themselves spiritually, symbolically speaking, never physically, God forbid. Maybe you need to do something a wee bit dangerous so that you will be in awe and fear and have that emotional connection that you really need to receive properly. I'm going to show you something that I will post later this week. Here is something that I just finished writing this morning. It's called Using, this is one of the two triads of the 42 names of God. We call that Kabel Rinat Amecha. Okay? I'm going to teach you not only what that name is, I'm going to teach you actually how to practically and properly use it. Now, the point that I make here in the essay, all right, I'm going to give the example of teaching you how to drive a car. Okay, you learn how to drive. Here's the gas, there's the brake, the wheel, etc. You don't need to have an expert degree in automobile mechanics in order to learn to drive. So how the spiritual or the prophetic mechanics of all this stuff works, don't worry about it. Just follow driving instructions and learn how to drive your own Merkava. And see with your own psychic vision. Heart, impression, call it whatever you like. Learn for yourself. Experience for yourself. Notice I shifted now to talking in the singular. Because like it says in the Gemara, in the Halacha, actually in the Mishnah, that school which we call Ma'aseh Merkava, of ascent, it's a nativ, like the Sefer Yetzirah says, a singular path. Because your personal insight and experience is going to be unique to you. You know how it says there are shivim panim la Torah, 70 faces or interpretations of the Torah. Well, the rabbis expanded on that. They say, yeah, there are shivim panim, or 70 faces, to each of the 4 levels of understanding Torah: pshat, remez, drash, and sod, or the simplistic way, the moralistic way, the academic interpretive way, and of course the experiential mystical way. Okay? There are different ways. Rabbi Bacharach, in his book, the Emek HaMelech, expands, and he says, just like you have 600,000 source souls in Israel, you have 600,000 source understandings of the Torah at each of the Pshat, Remez, Drash, Sod levels. So instead of having just 70 faces, gosh, now we're over 2 billion. And anybody who knows anything about scholarly rabbinics, what it is to be a rabbi, if you ever see the size of a rabbinic library, you'll understand why. Everybody's got an opinion, and no one's proclaiming this is the word of God, but this is the insights of the individual. And yours are as sacred and holy as the other. Clean out your klipot. Learn to see with the clear eye. And welcome into the school of the biblical prophets as you proceed up the ladder of ascent. So, I'll teach a class on that 42-letter name one day this week. And then I'm planning to go and teach the secrets of the 72 triads. I'm going to use as my foundation of all books, Raziel HaMalach itself. I see the English translation that exists, and that translation is so poor it should never have been translated. I mean, published, it's terrible. And there's so many misunderstandings about these triads and their usages. I'm going to show you how to use them. I'm going to give you the opportunity through Abulafia, through Raziel HaMalach, and through the Shara Kiddusha of Chaim Vital. I'm going to teach you techniques and practices, and I'm going to give it to you. And, like I said, don't think I'm doing you a favor. I'm giving you a loaded gun. And you're either going to learn to respect it and learn the proper experience, or you'll shoot yourself in the foot and you'll learn your lesson. That's just the way it is. What do I mean by that? I don't know. I guess you'll just have to figure it out as we go along. So, as I'm concluding now, the biblical teachings of the prophetic Kabbalah, we've already been through the examples of the biblical prophets and more, okay? I don't need to elaborate the lessons over and over again. You should be able to get this yourselves. And now, in the wise words of the great sage Hillel, in Tractate Pesachim in the Gemara, he says, you know, Israel, pretty cool, Nachlim Yisrael, right? Literally said, we're not prophets, but we are their children. We have the connection intuitively, psychically, naturally. Way back when I began teaching publicly in 1992, gee, time flies and we're having fun, 28 years already. The original name of our school is Yeshivat B'nai Nevi'im. Go back and look in my old books. It's always there. We actually just got rid of the Hebrew name and used the English name KosherTorah School. It was just easier and convenient for people breaking the teeth on the Hebrew. So, what the heck? I don't care about forms in that respect. But Hillel then said something very profound in another story. Okay? There's a very famous story of some person who wanted to test the rabbis. He's pretty much being a provocateur. And he goes to the great sage Shammai, leader of the generation, stands on one foot, and he goes, "Hey, Rabbi, I want you to teach me your entire Torah in the time that I can balance myself standing on one foot." That's a rather disrespectful thing to say, rather a disrespectful and arrogant way to approach a great rabbi. And Shammai responded properly. Took a stick and get out of here. I wouldn't even give you the time of day. You're going to show disrespect to me, I show disrespect to you. So the obnoxious guy, continuing in his obnoxiousness, goes to Hillel. Tries the same gimmick. Stands on a single leg, says, "I want you to teach me your entire Torah in the time I can balance on one foot." Hillel outsmarted him. He says, "Oh, really? You want me to teach it to you? Fine, here you go. If you don't like something, don't do it to somebody else. Period. That's all the Torah. That's all the prophets. That's everything. Now, go and do it." It's actually the foundation what the Christians later called the Golden Rule, which Yeshu quoted from Hillel. And the wise words of Hillel are the words of the children of the prophets. Zil, Gamar. Go. Don't sit around and be academic and think and question. Go and do it. This is the world of Asiyah, the physical world. Get busy. Act. Learn the prophetic techniques. Explore. Experience. Imagine. Travel in your mind and in your imagination, and allow your imagination to take you wherever it will. You might be surprised that some of the places that your imagination takes you are not imaginary at all. How will you know the difference? Well, I guess you'll just have to figure that out. Isn't that part of the discretion, the great Havdalah? And you will learn how to go with the flow. And so when weirdo things happen and they kind of look like they're distracting, there's no distractions. Everything's part of the same concentric whole. And that's just the way it is. And when you can see the whole of the whole, then everything is in Yehud. And that will be the level of consciousness that we need as a race to experience disclosure from within, which will eventually evolve into that which we call the coming of Mashiach and the Messianic era. And that's the Mashiach I wait for and work for every day. Come join me. Ariel Tzadok from the KosherTorah School. I want to thank you all for joining me in these classes from the biblical teachings of the prophetic, biblical origins of the prophetic Kabbalah. Come check us out at KosherTorah.com. Check us out on our YouTube channel, our Facebook page, Patreon. Please become a supporter and help us get the word out. Join our family, because essentially and ultimately, we're all one. I'm looking forward to working, learning, being with you. We'll see you all soon. Thank you again all for your support, being here. Shalom.